Hello and welcome to the Bronco Exchange. I'm your host, Dr. Shanessa Fenner, and today I have a very special guest. Her name is Tisha Waddell. She's in District 3 City Council member, also City Councilwoman. Welcome, Tisha.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fenner.
I want us to first start off by telling the audience a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I am a 40-year-old mother of two, and I have 4 unbiological children through marriage. I am not a native of Fayetteville, but I've been here now for about 22 years. My parents were both military, and so my mom retired here, and this became home. And it is the one place that I've been longer than anywhere in my life, and so I truly do consider this to be my home. I am in politics now. I'll be going into my 3rd year as an elected official, but by trade, I'm a business consultant. I teach people how to build and grow their own business. I have a background in conflict resolution, and I use that from time to time. I dabble in blended family dynamics, teaching people how to really just get along. So that's the long and the short of who I am. I love this city. I love the people of this city, and I love the work that I do, and I'm just really excited to be here today to talk with you about it.
Okay. So Tisha, talk to me a little bit about when was the moment that you realized that you wanted to be into politics?
I still don't know that I've realized that I want to be into politics. It's that word is such a put off sometimes, but I certainly realized that I wanted to be a public servant at a very young age. I didn't know that this was necessarily the way that it would manifest, but I've always had a real heart for making sure that people had what they needed and that they had access to information so that they could be well served, through that information. And I guess probably about 4 months before I ran for office the first time, I just had this, that sixth sense that says this is the next direction. And I remember speaking with our then city council representative and just letting them know, hey, if you ever decide to do something different, let me know, because I think that this is something that I'd like to pursue. And the opportunity presented itself very quickly because my representative at the time was our now mayor. And he reached back out at some point and said, get prepared because I'm going to make an announcement. And so he made that announcement, and probably about 24 hours later, I went and filed for office, and the rest is history.
Wonderful. Okay. So talk to me a little bit about the duties of the city council.
Very simply, we are responsible for determining how your tax dollars are spent in the community. So from public safety to services like your trash collection and, being able to determine how the streets are resurfaced and where sidewalks will be installed, deciding what type of economic projects the city will back. Those are the types of things that we're responsible for on a day-to-day basis.
Okay.
We really are the line of government that most quickly touches your everyday life.
Okay. Now, of course, as a city councilwoman, there are certain topics and issues and concerns that you're passionate about.
Absolutely.
Talk to me a little bit about some of those passionate things.
I'm very passionate about making sure that the lines of communication remain open. I'm a firm believer, from a little girl on, I recognize that if you can read and you can reason, you can pretty much figure anything out. And if you're good at math, that's a bonus. So I think that when we present information, I think sometimes people don't give our constituents enough credit. We have very smart constituents, and if we give them information, they are able to reason through the process and determine how they want their city to be run. And so I'm very passionate about making sure that the people that I represent have as much information as possible so that they can give me great feedback on how they want to see their city run, and then I can simply reflect their position. Because I truly believe that in public service, it is not our personality or our perception or perspective that is the most important. It's really that of the people we represent. And so if we give them great information and they're able to make informed decisions and give that information back to us, then it's our responsibility to make decisions from that position. And so that's by far what I'm most passionate about.
Okay. Of course, we have a very diverse city council. What kinds of relationships do y'all have?
It's very interesting because I think we work very hard to be a united front. it's a lot like a family. So in a family dynamic, you know, there's this adage that it's us and we present a united front, but behind closed doors we can hash out our issues. And so what I've learned about the council that is concluding their term in December is that we always wanted to make sure that we instilled the highest level of confidence in our ability to govern in the people that elected us. And we did that by making sure that we worked out our interpersonal disagreements amongst ourselves versus attempting to air them publicly. And so that's one of the dynamics, but that doesn't mean that those conflicts don't exist. And as I shared with you a little bit offline, conflict is so good, particularly in governing, because if we all believed the same and all thought the same, then there would only be a need for one of us. But the fact that there's 10 of us, we all come with a different perspective and a different idea. And because we're all 10 very strong leaders, as is demonstrated by the fact that we've been elected, we're very, very strong in how we present those ideas. And so, of course, there will be disagreements and there will be moments where, you know, there might be a notebook slammed or there might be a raised voice, but we're also all very professional. And so I've learned that the 10 of us have learned to work through that with a few exceptions without being disrespectful or without being contentious after the decisions are made. So the relationships, they're very much like a family. You've got people that you like a lot that you want to spend Thanksgiving with, and then you've got people that you just want to, you know, see in passing and say, let's get this work done and then go home. But there's no love, there's no lack of love because of that.
Okay.
Right.
Now in District 3, I see pedestrian safety and stormwater solutions have been some
Absolutely.
concerns for that district. Kind of talk with me about that a little
Absolutely. So let's take Rose Hill Road as an example. When you travel from one end of Rose Hill Road to the other end of Rose Hill Road, there's a lot of, it's not maybe necessarily a high volume of pedestrian traffic, but there's pedestrian traffic and there's not sidewalks on both sides. In fact, there are some areas of Rose Hill Road where there are no sidewalks at all, which can create a very dangerous walk, a very dangerous foot commute. And so when you talk about how to resolve that, that takes us back to the necessity for where we put sidewalks. Again, we've got other streets, for example, when you look at MacArthur Road, much more pedestrian, same situation, not many sidewalks. And so when we talk about how we can make it a more walkable city, that's one of the factors that we have to take into consideration. But it all plays into a part of like what our budget looks like, of course, because sidewalks cost money. And so, you know, being able to make those decisions on how we move forward with the installation, and it's not just in my district, it's actually across the city where we have a very unwalkable city. In fact, we received a very low rating for walkability in terms of a national ranking. And so sidewalks are just one of the parts of our walkability that we really need to be paying attention to for our pedestrian safety. Some of the other issues are the quality of our streets. So when you've got bad sidewalks and then you've got shoddy streets, you've got a recipe for disaster. And so we're really looking at, and that's one of the things that I'm really pushing for, how we can increase the expenditure in our budget toward those line items so we can expedite some of that work.
Now, Tisha, when you talk about sidewalks, for example, and you know that a lot of areas need sidewalks,
Right.
how do you know which neighborhood comes first? I mean, do you talk about, well, hey, this neighborhood, because of course, you know, you've got 10 different people.
Right.
They may feel that, hey, this area needs it more than you
Right.
think that this area. So how do you come to a conclusion of, you know, who's going to get the sidewalk first?
Absolutely. So we really rely a lot on our staff to help take the politics out of where we place our money. And so what we'll ask them often to do is do some research and come back and help us to prioritize. And they'll bring back different factors. So they'll bring back maybe the volume of pedestrian traffic. They'll bring back, you know, where there's development that's occurring, because when there's new development, developers are now responsible for laying sidewalks in certain areas. And so if there's sidewalks going in, we might be able to tie in and kind of work with that. They'll bring back information about what Department of Transportation may have going on. And so they'll help us to prioritize in that way. We also rely a lot on citizen input. So we'll have meetings. For example, we had a walkability meeting maybe about a year ago where we asked citizens to come out and mark a map and tell us where you'd like to see these things happen. And we use a lot of that information to be able to prioritize. That's why it's so important when citizens see these meetings come up, so very important for them to participate, because a lot of the decisions we make are prioritized based upon citizen input.
Speaking of voting and voter turnout as well, you know, there's a feel right now, a lot of people are not turning out when it comes to vote now. What
Right.
can we do to increase voters to turn out at the polls?
I think it goes back to that communication again and just really educating people, because there's almost a burnout, a fatigue when it comes not just to voting but to politics in general. We're in such a divisive time right now that people are beginning to feel very hopeless about the state of politics. And so I think one of the things that we can do to reinstill an excitement about the political process is to help people understand how very valuable their voice is. And the best way to demonstrate value is to be a great listener and then to act on what you hear. And so I think as elected officials, the best thing we can do in order to help improve voter turnout is to reconnect with our constituents, and not just when it's time for an election to happen, but all throughout the year, so that they can understand the value that we place upon their voice, not just their vote, but their voice throughout the year.
Okay. Now, Tisha, homelessness, of course, is a big, concern here in the All-America City. What are you all doing about homelessness?
So right now, it's really a very preliminary conversation, because we've not really gotten to the root of what is creating the issue in our city with homelessness. There are so many different variables that play a factor. For example, you may have a person who has difficulty maintaining employment. And so because they can't maintain employment, they can't afford to pay for a place to live. That's a very different situation than a person who may be dealing with addiction issues. And so it's not about being able to maintain employment. It's about being able to be employed at all, or even being able to be responsible for maintaining day-to-day life within the confines of being housed. So there are so many different variables that go into homelessness that it's very difficult to find a one-size solution. I think really at a city level, we're so ill-equipped to be able to dig down to the root of that issue that we have to rely on our partnership with the county, because the county is, of course, responsible for health and human services. And because of that, they have many more resources, and they have a much better understanding of what the issues are that surround homelessness. And so we have to rely on that partnership. We're talking a lot about a day center. There's been some conversation about tiny houses. There are many different conversations going on, and we've empowered our staff to look into it and say, bring us back information on what this looks like. But before we can really address resolving homelessness, we need to understand what's causing it. And so I think that that's one of the questions that we're really working to find out, how do we get the answer to that.
Okay. I'm also very concerned about mental health.
Absolutely.
Not only in adults, but students as well.
Absolutely.
That's another big issue that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely. And Dr. Fenner, I'll say this, and it's not a popular thing that I say, but I'm beginning to recognize, it's not a politically popular thing, but I'm beginning to recognize that a lot of people feel this way. A lot of the issues that we're seeing in our community really need to be addressed on a very organic level when it comes to how we're handling interpersonal relationships. A lot of it's almost like, you have the tree, but the roots are what sustain the tree. And a lot of the mental issues that we're seeing, the emotional issues that we're seeing, a lot of the abandonment that we're witnessing, it's really as a result of a fracture in the family somewhere. And if we can really, there's nothing that can legislate the repair of that family, but if we can begin to work together as a community, not begin, because the work has started, but if we can continue to work together as a community to support the family structure and to support wellness at a very basic level, then I think that some of the issues that we see that we're trying to address, using that tree as a metaphor, we're trying to touch the leaves, but we really need to be supporting the roots. And I think if we can continue to work to do that, some of these issues will begin to maybe not completely resolve, but will begin to diminish as we do that.
All right. Well, I thank you, Tisha, for part one of the show.
Absolutely.
And thank you, viewing audience, for looking at part one of the Bronco Exchange. I'm your host, Dr. Shanessa Fenner. Tune in a few moments for part two.
Hypnotized, familiar stranger, wait, hold up, don't run out.